Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. We're excited to have John Grant and Jenny Hollingsworth from Innovia Consulting with us. And John and Jenny will be presenting on their continued Business Central for Manufacturing 101 webinar series, Keep Your Stock Right with Reorder Policies. And before I pass it over to John and Jenny to cover on this topic, I would like to remind you that we are recording this session and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box. We will have our questions answered as we go throughout the webinar. So now I will pass it on to Jenny to kick off our presentation.
Thanks, Angie. Okay, like Angie said, we're going to talk about keeping your stock right with reorder policies. This is one of our webinars from our series of webinars on manufacturing. John and I have been teaching the manufacturing courses through NAV and BC UG community, as well as hosting a manufacturing class each year at Summit. So we thought we would take our knowledge of manufacturing and just create a webinar series as an alternate way for you guys to learn more about manufacturing and get your questions answered. So please feel free throughout the webinar to just jump in and ask your questions, or there's the questions box I'll be watching throughout the webinar as well to type your questions. So a little bit about ourselves. Again, I'm Jenny Hollingsworth. If you don't know me, I'm a senior application consultant at Innovia Consulting. I'll have been here about 15 years this year. And prior to that, I was at another partner for about 10 years. So all in all, I've been working as a lead consultant on NAV or now BC for the past 25 years. So I'll let John introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is John Grant from Innovia, of course. I think I've been here, I don't know, can't remember how long. How's that? No, like 12 years or 11 years, something like that. Previous life had a chance to work on other ERP products, AX, which is another Microsoft product, a little bit of GP, made to manage Sightline and whatnot. So I've had an opportunity to see a lot of different products, and just to let you know, I think you've got a real solid mid-market product that has a lot of functionality, and we'll attempt to talk about the reorder capabilities for this session. And just a side note, if you suffered through all our sessions all the way to the end, I think Angie has a big cash gift for everybody. So I'll let her talk to that later. So.
Oh boy. He's
I'm making up stuff. Yeah, I know. I know. Well, we got to have a little fun because it's a kind of a dry topic, but we'll see how we go.
All right. So again, our agenda, we're going to talk everything and anything about reordering policies. So how you would use them, best practices for each policy, and really then show how each reordering policy can affect the planning worksheet. So there are 5 different reorder policies in NAV or Business Central. They'll be the same in either product, whether you're using each of them. You have blank, you have your fixed reorder quantity, your maximum quantity, order, and lot for lot. So we'll start at the beginning and we'll look at the blank reorder policy. So I'll let John just kind of describe planning parameters on setting up an item with a blank policy and when you would use that, what are best practices?
Yeah, just a blank has its use. I'm going to say when you're first starting off with trying to understand how these reorder policies work, obviously most, 90% of the items would be blank, and you're trying to have a control group of items to figure out how you might set it up and how it works. That's a good practice. I wouldn't recommend, rapid starting in for all your items a reorder policy and then trying to figure out how it works. Start with a control group. Blank is also valid. We have customers who, they order overseas product maybe twice a year. Don't need to really plan for it. You've got it on another method to order it. Sample items, you might have if you got an R&D department and they're setting up items, you wouldn't be planning for those, and you don't want those to show up in a planning worksheet. And of course, items that are supply items or non-production items or distribution items would be candidates that you'd want to blank. And, we don't have an example of that, but it's blank. So that's a blank reorder policy. So that's valid. It is a valid selection on some items.
All right. So that one was probably the easiest reorder policy to talk about. So next we'll look at fixed reorder quantity and see when you would use that.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, any questions at all as we go through these, feel free to put it in the chat window or raise your hand or something, because you're just trying to give examples of how customers use these reorder policies. Everybody's, not everybody sets them up the same, and it's based on different requirements. And fixed reorder is one of those that, depending on how your business operates, may be a valid one for most items. So fixed reorder is just that, it's a reorder policy. And when you set it up, the fields that are in blue here in this slide are the ones that you could potentially fill in. You can fill in, fixed reorder has a reorder point. And a reorder point is simply when we're at this level or below, have the planning worksheet or the requisition worksheet pull up a suggestion potentially to a new purchase order, for instance. And because planning in NavBC is all time driven, this is one of those where maybe I run my planning through the next 4 weeks and I find out in week 3, based on my sales orders or assembly orders or transfers and production, of course, that you're going to fall equal to or below the reorder point level, and you would get a recommendation. So on this one, it's fixed reorder. We have when we hit 2,000, if the system senses equal to or less than, it's going to recommend an order for 5,000. There are some other fields that are used with this, but let's just talk about the reorder policy in general. If you're a distributor who has lots of inventory, you basically, if you get an order, you satisfy it. You don't want to have to, unlike a manufacturer who may give you a 3-week lead time to get product out the door, a distributor has to turn it within 48 hours, for instance. You would carry more inventory. But for a manufacturer, this reorder policy would be good for, I'll call them C-level items, low cost. If you have a few extra, not a problem. And in this example, we ordered 5,000 at a time. So if this item we got some extras, it's not tying up large sums of money, but there are extras. Where a distributor really wants to have A and B type items possibly on hand, because the company policy is we fill every order within 48 hours, for instance. Then you might carry more inventory. And the other, the suggested order quantity for the reorder quantity is the net requirement, whichever is greater. It's the reorder quantity or the net requirement, whichever is greater when it's suggested. So if you could fall below the reorder point and have no other sales orders in the systems, you get a recommendation. Or you have future orders that drive it below the reorder point and you would get recommendations. Things to consider with fixed reorder are if you use this, and like I said, like companies will use it for C items and some for others, you will start to get the messages if you're new to Nav or BC or you've probably seen this is create a new production, a new sale, purchase order, or cancel a purchase order, and you're kind of going, well, it's telling me to cancel a future purchase order and create a new one right now. And the example is I fall below the reorder point and I place a PO So we got it covered. It's ordering 5,000. Let's say it's ordering it a week from now. So my due date is a week from now. If I run planning tomorrow night without setting any other parameters, the system is going to tell me to cancel that future PO and place a new PO. And the reason it is because there's a field that came into play, I think it was 2013 maybe. It was a time bucket. And you want to be using this time bucket with this reorder policy, because that looks into the future to see that PO that's due in a week. So maybe my time bucket is 7 days. I want to pull that purchase order and see it. And if there's no other demand in the system, I will not get a suggestion in the planning worksheet because I've got it satisfied. Within 7 days, I'm going to replenish my reorder point issue. And there are, if you get below, if you get down to 0, obviously you'd have an emergency order. But this, along with safety stock, is a simple way to get started. And how we recommend customers to get started is to pick, like, I don't know, 5 or 10 items that move a lot, set them up as fixed reorder in the test company, and begin to understand what the system is suggesting. There are other fields you can fill in. Order multiple might be a carton size. You can have a purchase unit and measure on this item separate from inventory. And if you set that up, the requisition or planning worksheet will order it in that unit and measure, which is kind of nice, so you don't have to figure it out. And your order multiple would be, if I ordered 10, I've got to order 12. If I order 17 or demand is 17, I've got to order 24. You can have those kinds of things set up. You can have minimum order quantity. Maybe when I order from this vendor, I have to order a skid of product, or maybe not. From a different vendor, I don't, because you can buy the same product from 2 different vendors. And that's part of the, could be a lead time issue or a minimum order, all those kind of things. Maximum order quantity on a fixed reorder, not a lot of customers are using. That might be a storage space, possibly. It's something you store and you don't only have so much room. And a safety stock, by definition, is the amount that you need on hand at all times within the lead time. And one thing to remember in any of these setups that we kind of go through is it's static data. And if you're seasonal or have those kind of issues, you have to, what kind of process do we put in place to, like, for instance, push this to a rapid start worksheet, update it and update it offline, and maybe there's a how you determine what should my reorder point be, for instance. Maybe it's different the first part of the year compared to the last part of the year. That because it's a static, you have to maintain those items. That's part of the strategy when you're using any kind of planning, whether it's BC here or other. Data is possibly moving on you, and you just have to have a process to make sure that you update it quarterly. We have customers that, for instance, have a way to update quarterly, maybe twice a year. That's just part of the puzzle. And I think I'll let Jenny show the example.
All right, so for each reorder policy, we put up a simple example from the planning worksheet to show how it works. In this example here, our cocoa butter, we have 6370 on hand. And as you saw on the last slide, I copied it over here. Our reorder point was 2,000. So if we drop below 2,000, we need to reorder, and we need to always reorder at least 5,000. So you can see when we populated the planning worksheet here, it recommended that we order 5,000. And if we look at the order tracking for that line, it will tell us that we actually do need 1185 for a released production order, 2.5 for a firm plan production order, plus an extra 3812 to equal the 5,000. That is our reorder quantity. So that would be an untracked quantity that we're adding. Any further comments on this one, John?
Yeah, just again, fixed reorder you probably would use. Most companies are using. So it's important that if there's any questions out there, please ask them, because fixed reorder is a lot of customers use. Like I mentioned, there are fields on here to help with some of the noise, but we're not going to go into that level of detail. But it's a simple, when I hit this number or below, give me a heads up. And from a big picture, for those of you new to planning, it looks at all my sales orders, all my POs, all my transfers, all my production orders, all my assembly orders, on-hand inventory, and pulls it all together. I give it a, when I run the planning engine, whether it's a rec worksheet or a planning worksheet, I give it a start date and I go forward X number of weeks, and it's presenting that data back to the planner on purchased items, we'll pick on here. And in the end, it's a suggestion. So you have this, worksheet, a suggestion. Doesn't mean you have to carry it out. You have to execute it. So it's one of those functions within inside of BC that can be really a good tool. And if you're not on the journey with planning, I'd encourage you to start that process, because I'm working with a company that just started moving to it, and the more data you have, the bigger it is as a purchaser. I can no longer walk around and do my weekly check on inventory. It just gets unmanageable. And these reorder policies are all part of what you own, base software, and we've had good success with it. There are some nuances that you get into it, and we can help you with, but and that's the reorder policy, fixed reorder, which a lot of customers use.
And here we're just showing an example of how this reorder policy would affect the planning worksheet. In a few weeks, we'll show a slide at the end that shows our detailed session and actually running the planning worksheet and how that whole thing operates. But for this example, we're just showing how a reorder policy will be affected in the planning worksheet.
Correct. And while this is used a lot for purchased items, you can also use it for production items or assembly. And why would you use it? Well, maybe you have on your production items, you have a you always want to have some on hand. So you could set up a simple fixed reorder on a production item that when we get down to 10, we're going to build 10 more, something simple like that. So that would help with that too, in the production side for some items.
All right, so that's fixed reorder. The next one we're going to talk about is maximum quantity. So when would we use maximum quantity as a reorder policy?
Okay, I'll ask how many people are using maximum quantity, and my answer is I don't know, but we'll charge through it. The maximum reorder quantity is obviously another reorder policy, and I'll tell you how we see customers using it and go from there. So this reorder policy, much like fixed reorder, has a reorder point. So when I get down to this amount, it's going to tell me to reorder. Now, if you notice, the reorder quantity is not available on this, and why? Okay, so maximum, and I'll give you an example of how I've seen customers use it. You have a subcontractor that you need to maintain inventory at. So they always have these, I don't know, half dozen items or a dozen items, and you want to have 50 of these and 25 of these and whatever. So you could set them up. You can have a stock keeping unit. That's how you would manage a subcontractor's inventory out of the box. You'd have a stock keeping unit, and you would set them up as maximum reorder policy. Why? Because when you get down to the count point, it reorders back up to the maximum that you want to maintain there. So in this example, my maximum is 30,000. When I get down to 15, so I could get down to 10,000 based on what I'm looking at, and it will tell me to order 20,000. If I got down to 14,000, it will tell me to order 16,000. So it's always, the reorder quantity is determined by the system when you run it to get back up to the inventory you want to maintain at your remote site. I don't see this used in-house too much at a facility, but it's a good reorder policy for those subcontractors that you ship inventory to or you drop ship it, and you're reordering for them to a level, and obviously that level would have to be reviewed every once in a while to make sure you've got enough there. Other than that, it functions just like the fixed reorder. You have a time bucket that you'd want to work with. You have order multiples. You have safety stock you can maintain, although I haven't seen that maintained on a maximum at a subcontractor. It's pretty much, what do they have of ours? Because at month end, you have to account for that inventory because you still own it until they consume it. And then because we have it set up as typically a stocking median location, you have to have a process in place to relieve that inventory, and then whether we transfer material over there or we purchase it to replenish it, there's just that ongoing management of that remote inventory. So maximums are valid, a good valid reorder policy for in certain cases. And again, if you were looking to do this, please, just use the test company and understand how it works. And none of these reorder policies are really complicated. It's just trying to understand why is it telling me to order it in the planning worksheet, which this session we won't go through, but we will go through that down the road. I'll turn it back to Jenny and see an example of it.
All right, so this one is an example of the maximum quantity. So here you can see the planning worksheet is telling us to reorder 20,000. Our max quantity is 30,000. Our reorder point's 15, and our item quantity on hand is 10,000. So if we look at order tracking, it's showing all of the different production orders and sales orders that are requiring this product of the sugar, and it's telling us to order 20,000. Again, the difference between the max to the quantity on hand is 20,000. We do have one question, John. How does this option work with minimum buying requirements?
I think you would just set up in the, let's see, what field?
I can go back.
You would put in the order multiple, probably, is the minimum, might be the minimum you can order. But the maximum is total inventory. But the minimum you can order, if that's true, you want the planning worksheet to tell you, I can't order 2, I've got to order 12. And then you might have to adjust your maximum because it will, in the end, if you have demand, what's the order? Let's see, the maximum order is 30,000, but if I had 2 demands of, let's say, that would drive it below the 15,000, it will order more than the maximum of 30,000. If you follow what I'm saying there, it will do that. But order multiple is, to me, is always a key field for handling the minimum order, and also even in production side, the minimum run quantity is the order multiple.
All right. All right, so moving on, our third reordering policy is the order policy. So we'll talk about when you would use this and what type of planning parameters you can use with the order policy.
Okay, so the order policy, one key thing here, if you look at let's see, include inventory on this screenshot, it does not include inventory. So I could have 100 of these on the shelf, get a sales order, and it would tell me to buy it or make it. So it doesn't include inventory. So it truly is only when there's demand for it. There's a couple things this can be used for. Those of you that create production orders off the sales order understand that when I do that, I get a reservation. So I get a hard reservation from the production order back to the sales order. Well, if you didn't want your CSRs to be creating those production orders, another option is to, for certain items, set them up as the reorder policy order. It'll push it to the planning worksheet. And then when you create that, it'll create the reservation there for you. From the planning worksheet, it'll create the link from the production order to the sales order. One thing with the reorder policy, it doesn't group items within reorder cycle. So we're not consolidating orders together. If it's the same day, you could get 2 on 1 production order, for instance, or one. But it's truly for items either never have, or you have to buy it or make it. The blue fields here are what we fill in. You can have safety stock, but the interesting thing is, because it doesn't look at it, that's kind of like, why is that even available? Because if you think about it, hang on, down here a second. Okay, so uses for it. It just matches up the order quantity typically on a sales order to the purchase order, production order. So it's a 1-for-1, and it has its use. Like I said, the place where I see it is if you choose not to create production orders, is a great use from the sales order. You can have that reservation created from the planning worksheet if the order policy is order, if it fits the item, if you never have any on inventory. Again, only certain fields are exposed when you enter the reorder policy there. Now one thought here is when you're changing reorder policies, and that does happen, you might go from lot for lot, or we'll get to that in a second, to a fixed reorder. Clear out the values that are in some of these fields due to the previous reorder policy, just from a best practices. I know in older versions, sometimes it would get confused. You'd have a value in some field and you go, well, this reorder policy doesn't use it. But I think, at least in the older versions, the logic, how it was written, didn't expect you to have any values in those fields. And if you had a reorder policy and you fill it in, like you did the, I don't know, what would be a good one, like select reorder quantity. You fill that in because the reorder policy allowed you to do it, but now you change to maximum and doesn't use it. It still might see it and think it's got to do something with it, so that's just the best practice.
So John, there's one question or statement, I'm not sure. It says this does not work with bins.
I guess what do you mean? Are you planning in general? You're talking about here, if you're running directed put away in nav, DC, for planning purposes, it doesn't screen a bin if it's I don't know, a supply bin or a pick. You can set up the types in there, but I'm not sure. All these things work with bins, so I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I think on that question we need more information. Okay, I'll wait and see if more gets typed.
Okay, we can show an example of this then, because it's not complex either. This is pretty straightforward.
Okay, so in this example, the planning worksheet, there's 3 lines for this item. And we had ordered 3 different sales orders, 10 boxes on July 20th, July 22nd, and July 24th. So because there's a hard reservation between the order and the production order with the order policy, it's going to create a separate line for each. You can see the due dates line up and match that sales order shipment date for the quantity of 10, creating 3 new production orders. And we're just showing a screenshot of the order tracking for the first line. So you can see this first line here, that 10 is for sales order 5 for 720 for the 10. So there's that hard reservation between the 2. So order is pretty straightforward. The next reorder policy is lot for lot. So we'll talk about best practices and when to use the lot for lot.
Okay, so this is the I'll call it. This is this is the last reorder policy that's in the system, and lot for lot. I'm going to say, in our experience, we use it for production quite a bit. In other words, we might have this along with safety stock for production. So there isn't, well, you do have some items that we might, when it gets down to 10, reorder and make 10 more with a fixed reorder. Most manufacturers I see set up as lot for lot because they're making as the orders come in, and then they're determining, trying to combine orders to be efficient. So lot for lot allows us to do that. So lot for lot could be on a production order, and it keeps inventory down because it other than safety stock, you might not have any on hand. So it's got a real good use, but like this note says here, we tend to use it with safety stock again. So lot for lot opens up, the fields below. We can have a safety stock. We can include to choose inventory or not. Now, why would you maybe not include inventory? I had a customer that they basically launched their orders for I think it was 3 to 4 weeks. They'd buy enough inventory and they ran presses, and they just ran presses 7x24. So halfway through the month, they would want to say, well, here's what we think we're going to run next month. And they wanted to see planning without any inventory or include anything in, we'll pick on me, include anything in me. So they would run it out in the future and just see from a gross requirement, here's what we need to order. So it does have some use to include inventory or not. I'd say 90% of our customers include inventory just like the fixed reorder. One of the key fields is lot accumulation. And this is used when I get an order in order to save on setup possibly, or just efficiency. I want to go forward from the date we need it, so many days, and combine those into one order. So in this case, we've got 7 days. So if I have an order next Monday, it's going to go forward 7 days and consolidate those orders. Now, when it pushes it to the planning worksheet, I can still, as a planner, go in and look and see, oh yeah, this quantity of X number is due to these 2 or 3 sales orders. So that lot accumulation period typically is populated. Rescheduling period also is one of those fields to help with the noise of new and delete. So that just, you look forward, do I have an order beyond 7 days that I might want to change a quantity on versus create a new one and delete, or that kind of thinking. So both the fixed reorder and the lot for lot, which is the most reorder policies that companies use, those two, both have time fences to look forward to help the planner with some of the noise that you get typically in a planning system. Again, we have minimum order quantity, maximum order multiple is key, because if this lot for lot is used for my production orders, I might have a batch size. If I'm making something, I'm mixing something, I'm blending, I fill in the order multiple, and that's the size of my that the most I want to have on one production order. So if my order multiples, let's say 500, and I had an order for 1500, I would get 3 production order recommendations versus 1 for 1500, because I can't fit 1500 in my vessel or my mixer or whatever it is. So that comes in handy to help the planner see visually of where there might be issues. And again, the planning worksheet is calculation. Regenerative is using this data with everything in the system and coming up with an order quantity that I should run this production order for. This also can be used for purchased items if it fits with, but I've seen customers use this with purchased items if they have a pretty solid safety stock. You know, that safety stock is intended to be the amount you need on hand within the lead time. But if you're running fixed reorder, that's fine. You can mix all these order policies. You don't have to have everyone the same. So that's lot for lot. And I think there's an example that we have.
Another statement was, I've never gotten that to work with production orders.
Cool.
Except for, I'm not sure which field.
And hearing that, it's like, I'm sure you know, and I would.
The order multiple.
The order multiple. Oh yeah. Well, the simple way to do that is to set up an item. Well, in test company again, I'm going to say that's a prod order item, and it's a lot for lot, and say order multiple is 500, and put a sales order in for like 1500, and the planning worksheet should give you 3 different production orders as a suggestion.
Okay, she'll try it.
And well, sorry, the maximum. Let's see. Let's see. Is there a maximum quantity? No. So it has to be that order multiple. Maximum. Sorry, it's a maximum order quantity. I'm getting the order multiple is just that. I make 200, 400, 600. The maximum order quantity is in one particular production. I only want 500. You're correct. Yeah. The maximum order quantity is what you want to use to separate into 3 production orders.
Okay.
So try that and see if that does the trick for you.
Okay, so then this is an example of lot for lot. We had quantity on hand of 23, 2 sales orders due over 7 days apart. Our lot accumulation period was 7 days. So because of that, it has separated the production orders into 2 different production orders. If the orders shipment date had been within the same 7-day period, it would have combined both of them onto 1 production order in the planning worksheet. All right, so those are all 5 reordering policies. We had a few questions come up during. I'll just wait and see if anyone has any other questions.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting, I do have one more of note, and it's a hard one to catch. But if you're using stock keeping units, anybody using stock keeping units, and you have location mandatory turned on, if you run planning, let's say blue is your default location, fine, you know, item codes, and I create a stock keeping unit for white location. If I forget to create that stock keeping unit, the system's going to default to lot for lot when I have a sales order for white with no using any order multiple or any of those kind of parameters. So it'll still be in the planning worksheet, but it'll be like, I don't get why that number's there. It's because the stock keeping unit wasn't created and populated. It didn't find a stock keeping unit. So it could show up in the planning worksheet, but the quantity is going to be like a head scratcher. Why is it doing that? Because by default, if it doesn't find a stock keeping unit, it's going to default to lot for lot and with no planning parameters applied to it. So when you are using stock keeping units, you know, like I got a New York location, Arizona location, and I forget to create that Arizona stock keeping unit, it'll still plan the item, but it's going to default to lot for lot.
All right, another question is, the time bucket and overflow fields do not show on the item card under planning. Is there a setup area where I can change this?
I
guess my question would be, what version
right.
of nav are you running? '18 on-prem.
Yeah, you have to show more fields possibly, or maybe somebody took them off because they didn't think you were using them. But by default, they should be there. But it might be under show more fields.
Yeah, I guess my first thing would say show more fields or customize this page and see if they're there. If they're not there, then a developer would probably have to add those back to the page because they should be there by default.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're out of the box, as far as I know. But those definitely help with some of the noise on fixed reorder, particularly.
All right. So if you have any other questions or you want to learn more, our resident expert John here would love to answer your questions. So here's his contact information. John's like, you put me up there, huh? Our next 3 webinars in our manufacturing series, the next one is on May 27th on doing production and sales forecasts. And the planning worksheet, tips, tricks, and best practices are the next one after that. So we'll be about 3 weeks out for that one. And I will turn it back to Angie.
All right. Thank you, John and Jenny, for presenting today. And to everyone on our webinar today, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you taking some time out of your day and seeing the presentation that John and Jenny gave. And if you're watching on demand, we thank you for joining us. And I just want to let you know that our annual customer conference is coming up on May 21st. And due to COVID-19, we will be moving to a virtual conference. Contact your rep or visit our conference page where we have all the details for our virtual conference. That website is innovia.com/conferences. And this is a free event for you to virtually attend, and we would love to have you take part in it. So register now so you don't miss out on this great event. And we have another webinar coming up on May 26th. Breon Jennings from Innovia Consulting is going to be presenting on Analyze Data by Dimensions right from Business Central. So if you're interested in attending that webinar or any of John and Jenny's webinars, feel free to go to our events page, and that's innovia.com/events. And we do have a podcast that is going on. If you have not already heard of it, it's called the Innovia Conversation. And we just want to encourage you to listen to our selection that Steve Waltz and Jeff Progulski have provided to us over the last year. They do about 2 episodes a month, and you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out the selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. All right, well, thank you again, John and Jenny, for presenting, and to everyone on our webinar today. And we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone.